Hey, welcome back to the Motivational Intelligence Podcast. I'm Sean Johnson, and today we're bringing you a conversation with the one and only James Fleming. So here's a quick bio on James. After 17 years in the oil field, holding numerous senior leadership roles from the Middle East and Asia regions, U.S. and the U.K., with companies such as Baker Hughes, Halliburton, and Weatherford, James Fleming took the plunge to get out of the oil field game for good. In February 2017, James and his wife set up the Power Within Training and Development, a leadership and professional development company primarily based in Scotland, UK, where James is the managing director. James and his wife Ines are fully committed to giving back and helping their local communities via voluntary roles in organizations like Young Enterprise Scotland, Children Panel for Scotland, and MCR Pathways. The Power Within is also one of TwoLogical's certified global partners, representing TwoLogical in the European markets. In this episode, we talk about James's sit-down on small business with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, the strategies he used to secure terms and close deals that everyone told him was impossible, leadership lessons from around the globe, and a whole bunch more. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with James Fleming. The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is brought to you by TwoLogical's new virtual seminar, Adapt, How to Thrive in a World of Turbulence. Join David Naylor in this exclusive live event with leadership insights on how to effectively transition and manage your team remotely, create a new team purpose and vision for 2021, turn fear and uncertainty into consistent motivation and action, and a whole bunch more. Go to TwoLogical.com for more information on dates. And as a listener of this podcast, you get a 20% discount on tickets. Just use the code ADAPT2020 at checkout. The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is also brought to you by Mojo, the mental fitness app incubated at TwoLogical. With new insights and guidance every day, people that use Mojo report feeling less stressed and more motivated, boosted performance at work, and improved well-being at home. You even get access to episodes of this podcast up to 2 weeks early on Mojo. Mojo is available through invitation only, so join the waitlist at joinmojo.com to reserve your place in line.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Motivational Intelligence Podcast. This is David Naylor. I've got the pleasure of having Sean Johnson on the other microphone today, and we've got a phenomenal guest. His name is James Fleming, and James is a Scotsman who has lived all over the world, has tremendous background in leadership and leading teams and turning teams around, and just has gained some tremendous wisdom in that regard. So we're very excited to have him share it with us. James is also, he runs a training and consulting practice out of Scotland, and he has just become TwoLogical's newest global partner as well. So not only is he a tremendous resource, but he's also an individual who has worked with and is now partnering with TwoLogical and representing TwoLogical in the European market as well. So James, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Dave. I couldn't have paid you any more money to make it sound any better.
Well, you're somebody who's easy to say good things about. So your intro, I didn't really have to work on too much there.
I'm definitely going to play this back to my wife since you've said that now.
It's always nice to have a little reinforcement in that.
Right? Oh yeah.
So James, there's so much in your background and your story that we could start off the conversation with. I'd like to start it though with an experience that you had that is something pretty darn unique that most people in life will never experience. You had the opportunity to meet with Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the UK in Downing Street, and to share some wisdom and advice about how the country could forward small businesses. And could you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, so I was my first year in business, and I was part of a group of small entrepreneurs in the UK, and it's a kind of magazine, and it's around startup businesses. And I'd been approached by this company, and they asked me, would I like to represent the small businesses in Scotland and go down to number 10 Downing Street. And first of all, I thought it was a hoax. I thought, what? Just let alone me, because I just started up in business. My whole background's corporate. So I was still really, wet behind the ears in terms of starting up a business, but they seen something in the way I was going about business. They thought I would be able to add a good voice for the Scottish small and micro business owner. So, of course, I'm the type of person that jumps at any opportunity for marketing myself for the business. So I said, absolutely, I'll come and do it. And I still thought, this is never going to happen. A few weeks went by, and sure enough, they asked me for a copy of my passport, because you've got to pass security. Mm-hmm. So they've got to give you a background check and everything like that. So you've got to sign all these documents to say, yeah, that's okay to do this. So then it started to become a little bit more real. And the premise of the meeting was, how are the UK government supporting small business owners, or how can they support them better, give more, kind of backing to accelerate small and micro businesses? So that was the kind of premise of it. And they had kind of said, look, try and kind of build a couple of questions that you want to ask, so that when you go down there, you'll get your opportunity. So I kind of really thought about my own journey. And then, because I work with a lot of small and micro businesses, I first started out, what I would do was coach people around the kind of mindset, because I'm a strong believer in, and then this is why TwoLogical is such a massive part of my own life and business, is my vision and view of any business is, first of all, you've got to believe you can do it. The belief will create the thoughts that you need to take the actions that will ultimately create the results. So I was teaching these micro businesses this kind of concept, and I thought, this is all great, but without support of the UK government, it is almost, for most people, people give up too easy. So I thought, how can the UK government give more support? So anyway, I went into a kind of thought process. I do a lot of walking, so I kind of went out and went for a walk and thought, okay, what is it that I believe that the UK government could do better? And what I thought was, it was creating a thing called the business toolbox, or the business growth toolbox. Now, in that toolbox was so, for example, so the UK, you start up a new business, yeah? So let's say you're Bob the Builder, and you want to start up a new company. You're a builder, you've worked for something your whole life, but you think you can do it better. So how can the UK government help with that? Now, there is a lot of help out there in terms of grants, and there's some funds, but it kind of leaves the business owner to decide where they think they should best utilize that money. Now, my experience in speaking and working with these businesses, they haven't got a clue where to best spend their business or where to utilize money. So I come up with this business toolbox idea, and basically you get, let's say, for example, £2,000 to hire a business coach, and you get £2,000 to hire a marketing company, and you get £2,000 to build a website. So I think it was a total of about £12,000, but it must be used for these 6 areas of business building. So anyway, I'd come up with this in my head and how it would look. And so the day of going to meet Theresa May, so I got the train from Glasgow, and I was in my joggies and my training shoes, and I was really casual. Now, if you see my social media, I'm always business dressed. I like my suits and my shirt and my tie. It's just something that I believe, it's a belief within me that portrays who I am and what I'm trying to create. So anyway, I went down on the train, and I took a video diary of this whole journey. Uh-huh. So anyway, gets on the train, and I took a video diary of me getting on the train and explaining what I was going to do, and then arrived in London, and I went in and I had a pint of beer, and then I went and got changed. So I had my suit and a big suit carrier, so I went and got changed, And then I appeared 10 Downing Street and gave my name. And we went into 10 Downing Street. And then they took us upstairs into this big boardroom. So there's all these different business owners from all over the UK. We're sitting in a big boardroom, and we've got the head of UK business, small businesses. We've got a few other governmental people in there, but there was no Theresa May. So I'm sitting thinking, here we go, 10 Downing Street. You know, obviously I'm taking pictures and, you know, and taking live videos while I'm outside 10 Downing Street. And so we gets into the boardroom, and everybody kind of went round the table and they had to ask their questions. So first of all, they kind of introduced themselves. So, hi, I'm Bob the Builder. I'm from here. My business is this. And my question is this. Mm-hmm. So we go around this table, and I think there was about 20, maybe 22 businesses there. And I was sitting right next to the kind of the government, for the small business. And still Theresa May wasn't in at this time. So we're going round the table, and we were in there about just over an hour. And then Theresa May comes in. So she made her entrance, and she welcomed everybody in, and she sat down. Now, by this time, I was the last person to talk. But another 15, 20 minutes, we all kind of got 5 minutes each. So anyway, they got to me and said, so would you like to stand up and introduce yourself and tell us why you're here? And I stands up and says, hi, I'm James Fleming, and I'm an alcoholic. Well, the whole room erupted. Because I just thought, why not make an impression? I know it sounds terrible, but it was so funny. Anyway, and I said, look, I don't have a question, I have a suggestion. And my suggestion is, so I explained this business growth thing to them, where they issue this fund. Now, to get the fund, you've got to have a business plan, and you've got to get approved. And the people who get the money have also got to go through an approval process. So you're not having, because there is a lot of sharks out there in this world, as we all know, people who say they'll do and don't. So it was I explained all this process, and they said, James, this all sounds wonderful, but how are we going to afford this? Where do we get the money from? And I said, that's simple. I says, what you want to do is you want to cut business rates to 10%. And by cutting the business rates to all businesses, you will attract investment. People will start to invest in even the companies here will start to use their savings from the business tax, the corporation tax, to reinvest in their business. That will bring in people off unemployment. It will generate more GDPR, more money for the government, more money for the government. That's how you fund the process. Well, I got a standing ovation. So not only did I have a solution, but also how they were going to fund it. Perfect. So yeah, that was in my first year of business. And I think I got 45,000 views on LinkedIn of that post with me doing my little video going down to 10 Downing Street. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
So James, I gotta ask, you're in this meeting, you're the last one to talk, you stand up. My name is James and I'm an alcoholic. Kind of like a whoops, wrong type of meeting.
That's exactly what I said. Those words. Oops, wrong meeting. Yeah.
So how did Theresa May react to that?
They were absolutely peeing themselves laughing. They thought this was the bit. And by the way, after that, Theresa May called me the Scottish Alcoholics. That was how they referred to me for the rest of for the next 35 minutes. I was referred to as the Scottish Alcoholic.
Well, you certainly made an impression.
No doubt.
Yeah. And they promised me they would give me feedback on my idea, but I'm still waiting.
Government moves at a snail's pace sometimes.
Yeah.
What an incredible experience that had to be.
Yeah. So, all right. So how do you go from, I kind of want to rewind for a minute.
Yeah.
You just told us a story about how you met with the Prime Minister of the UK and made her laugh so hard.
She peed herself.
She peed
there
herself.
You go.
I kind of want to rewind to
your childhood? Like, how did you end up there? Where did you grow up?
Okay. Now that's another story. So I mean, I am the stereotypical Glaswegian boy. Grew up in a really working class background. My father is a floor layer carpet fitter. Runs his own business, really small business, self-employed. But we kind of, and I had three sisters, so I had one older sister. I was the next one down, which was about 18 months difference. And then I've got a younger sister who's 4 years below me, and then one 5 years below me. So we kind of grew up in money was tight, back in the day, I mean, I had a good life. My parents split up when I was young, but, and I moved in with my dad. He always kind of was there for me. But we were kind of brought up it was a case of get a job. That was the key thing in the 80s, was just to get a job. Yeah. So we were just brought up with the kind of, it wasn't about going to university and things like that were like for rich people, for the other people. We were really working class. Amazing father by me. Me and my dad we're so close. I'm so lucky to have such a loving father. But back then, not necessarily that's how things were. But I was brought up, really working class. But there was always something. And I talked about this with David last time we were having a chat. There was something in me where I never, ever just accepted the status quo. And I don't know where it came from. But I know that it's something that I've learned. But I just don't know how, because my sisters are so different from me. But I never, ever accepted the status quo. I always believed that I was in control, one way or another. That if things weren't going to plan, it was something I was doing. If they weren't going to plan, it was something I was doing. And I always had that in me, that I was in control.
That's such a key aspect of, we've talked about that so much with groups around the world, that, it's really where success starts. It's when somebody accepts that level of ultimate responsibility, because so much changes in life. I mean, people let go of the excuses and the finger pointing, and, to your point, James, if something's going wrong, it's because of me. If something's going right, it's because of me, and recognizing that we are the ones, and, based upon our actions, based upon, the way we're perceiving things, you talked about it, it's what it is that we believe about ourselves, what it is that we're thinking about. And so we can't change the world, but we can absolutely change the way we react and respond to it. And that is to no small extent really the launching point of all success.
Yeah. I mean, I think another key point here, so when I say I'm in control, so for example is, I mean, fear is a big thing that comes up in a lot of people. So fear not doing it, fear of not taking those opportunities in life. I've never really had that. I've always been almost fearless, because I've always thought about what's the worst thing that can happen. I ain't going to die by taking an opportunity. And I mean, I don't mean this to come across crude by any means, but that's not going to happen to me. The worst that's going to happen is I fail and I learn.
Yeah.
And then I go, I maybe shouldn't have done that. And I've kind of went through my life like that. I mean, that's probably why I've been so successful with starting up my own businesses, because I don't hold, when I think fear now, I just think excitement, something new, something to learn. And it's almost like I've always kind of had that, even though I didn't know what it was back then. Now I really do understand it, and that's another story I'm sure you're going to ask me about later. But I think it was that I've made a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes, along the way. But I moved out of the UK when I was only 22. I went to America. I lived in Ireland. I lived in Oman. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in Saudi. I've lived in Dubai. I've lived in KL. So I've always knowing that if I want to go and do something in my life, something exceptional, something special, then it's up to me to go take those risks.
Yeah. Well, and I love the way you frame that too, James, because what really is the worst thing that can happen? And for so many people, just because they never really stop and think about that, they're so paralyzed by the fear. But if you really step back, what really is the worst thing to happen? I could screw it up. Okay, well, can I live with it if I screwed it up? Am I gonna learn something from that? Am I gonna benefit because I learned something? And right then and there, all of a sudden, to your point, the fear becomes not something that you have to run from, but it's just the human response to doing something different.
Yeah, no, and to that point, what we always talk about, fear really coming from the unknown. And as soon as you say, what's the worst that can happen?
Not an unknown.
It's not an unknown anymore. So I love that as an approach. James, is that something, kind of asking yourself that question, what's the worst thing that can happen? Is that something, do you write down answers to that? Like when you're evaluating an opportunity, is it something that you just kind of like rhetorically ask for yourself, kind of like that little voice in your head?
I would say I used to put more thought into it than I do now. And that's through experience. So for example, I think the best way to describe it is calculated risk. Mm-hmm. So what's the worst that can happen? And I mean, and the for example would be this. Now, catastrophic failure for any business is for everything to go away tomorrow and have to start from scratch. That's probably business owners or anybody going into business or thinking of going into business is losing everything. For me, it doesn't matter. For me, it's like, well, I'll start again tomorrow. I'm still going to be able to feed myself. Luckily, I live in a society where the government's going to make sure that I've still got food on the table. But the worst thing that's going to happen, I'm not going to die. I'm just going to have a massive lesson that I've just learned. So I probably put more thought into it in the past than I do now. I almost instinctively listen to my gut now, kind of think, like, I've learned that lesson. I kind of understand that risk. That isn't going to happen. So I don't need to put as much thought into it now. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, one other thing that I'm, just in the way you're describing that I'm noticing is that you seem to have a very, I'm always just going to get back on the horse mentality. Where do you think that came from?
Dave asked me something similar the last time we were having a chat. It's a tough one because I'm a massive, I mean, it's not, for me, it's not up for debate. Everything that I know I've learned from somewhere. I'm a massive believer and I tell stories about, I love my football, and I tell stories about Ronaldo and Messi. And when people look at them, they think they've this God-given, they've got this massive, God-given talent at birth. And we know that not to be true. So I know that I've learned it. I just don't know exactly when I learned it. I think I would have to say based on experience, based on being thrown in at the deep end and having to swim. And that happened really early on in my career. I've always, again, go back to risk. I've always been happy to jump in at the deep end. Even when I was a young boy, I've always been quite happy just to jump in and see what happens and sink or swim. Again, I don't even know if I'm answering your question because I really don't know where it was. I've got to probably say there must be something in my past, like young. But I do believe that to be so strong-minded and to be, my mindset is absolutely solid in terms of where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. Well, the how doesn't really matter, but where I'm going. So I think it's just experience, maybe. I really don't know how to answer that one.
Yeah. Could you give us an example of either, from when you were young, or you mentioned, you had certain points in your career where you kind of were put in a sink or swim situation?
Yeah. So I did a lot of training with Intel Pentium processors. So I worked for Intel. And I had a really comfy job back in Scotland. I was an electrical engineer, making good money, and I got an opportunity to move to the US to do some training. So it was about 7 or 8 months training over in the US, and I'm thinking, well, I'm still really young. Is that something I want to do? And I thought, you know what have I got to lose? And then that then led to me moving to Ireland. And again, had no idea. Didn't know what I was doing, didn't know where I was going, but I just done it anyway because I thought, at least I can always come back home if I don't like it. So I've always been happy to jump in. But I think the one thing, if there's one thing that jumps out more than any of the stories, it would be when I got offered the manager's job over in Saudi Arabia. This was my first real senior kind of management job. And I hadn't a clue about P&L. I hadn't a clue about people management. I really didn't know. All I knew, I was really good with people and I was really good at explaining things. And I was kind of put in a position. And I remember my boss at the time he was from Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And I remember asking him, I was doing my very first yearly plan. So it was coming up to October, November time. And I was asked to do my plan for the following year. So this was 2007 plan, going into 2008. And I remember thinking, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. So I'd said to my boss, who'd only been my boss it was a boss by default. It wasn't him that hired me. It was his boss that hired me, and he ended up by default becoming my boss. And I remember sitting down and saying, I don't know I've never done this before. I don't know how to do a plan presentation. Now, if you've ever done one, they're seriously complicated. You've got to get a gap analysis and really diving into the business and headcount and working with HR and working with your accounts team. I'd never done any of this. So I remember going to this guy, and he sent me the old presentation that the previous guy had done the year before as a guide, and he wouldn't help me. He almost refused to help me. Now, I couldn't understand why, because my whole life has always been about, in fact, it's probably one of the key things to my own growth is I want to help people, because the more I help people, the better they become. The better they become, the better I feel about myself, and generally the better my business grows. Anyway, let's rewind back. So I had to do this plan, and I hadn't a clue what I was doing. So anyway, I put this plan together, and I spent day after day, night after night. I sat with my accountant, and I got him to explain gap analysis. I got him to explain P&L, when you recognize revenue. So I really, really went to town learning this all by myself. Anyway, I sent it to this new boss, and I says, can you look over this? And he kind of just says, yeah, it's good. Now, the next week, I'm presenting this to Baker Hughes Global. Yeah. So we've got the CEO of Baker. It wasn't Martin Craighead at the time. It was Chad Deaton. Mm-hmm. So we've got the CEO of Baker Hughes. We've got all the vice presidents on this call. Yeah. And what we did in Saudi, so each product line would go in one at a time and present their plan. And I went in, and my plan was up on the screen, and they asked me to talk them through the plan. So I was talking them through the plan. And Khalid New, who was the vice president for Middle East and Asia, he was on the call, but he was over in Dubai, and Chad Deaton and all the team were all on, and they were going through my numbers, and he says, James, I don't see any gap analysis for your revenue. And like, what if this doesn't happen? And I says, it will happen. No, he says, no, James, but what if it doesn't? And I says, it will. I says, I'm committing that I'll make this happen. And the vice president, Khalid now, who, by the way, became a very good friend and a mentor of mine, turned and says to me, James, this is on the call. You're pissing against the wind. I've worked with Aramco for the last 25 years. Aramco have never changed terms and conditions. You will not recognize, I think it was something like $64 million that I promised I would get the revenue recognized, even though it was against the terms and conditions. So anyway, long story short, 2 months later, I got the revenue recognized. I couldn't wait to go on a call with the whole global team and tell them, I told you so. And that year, not only did I meet plan, I absolutely blew the plan out the water. I think we exceeded plan by something like 12 million above plan. And that was kind of, so that moment, that sink or swim, it was almost like a light bulb in my head went off, that the effort, if I put in the right effort and I seek the advice of the right type of people who are like me and who want to help, I can go on and achieve anything. So that was almost like the one point that started the real strength in my mindset. There's a couple of other crackers but I don't know if you want me to tell you them.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure we did.
Yeah.
So the second one was I was in Dubai, and in Dubai, all the senior management sat at a big table. And I remember looking over at the table, and I used to sit and think, I wonder what they talk about. I wonder what really interesting conversations they're all having and what books they read. And so I'm imagining, visualizing, sitting at the table and what they're all talking about. And I about a year and a half later, obviously I get invited, I got promoted, and I was then looking after Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait and Qatar. So I was now a senior manager, and I was invited along to sit at the table every time I went to Dubai. And sure enough, they talked about the same bloody things. Golf, football, wine, cigars. And I'm like, these guys are just like me. So that was another revelation that, you know what, these people, we're just humans. And don't ever look at someone and think they're better than you. The only thing they've got over you is probably more experience. So that was another big biggie. And then, of course, was TwoLogical coming into my life.
So you mentioned a few stories there. I want to circle back to the first one you talked about when you were country manager in Saudi Arabia. You're sitting in a meeting with all the high ups of this global organization. Everybody with experience is telling you, James, this number is impossible. And then 2 months later, you come back and hit the number and you blow the number out of the water. How did you do that?
So what I did, so it was based on, so it was all about revenue recognition. So we had provided about $130 million worth of equipment to Aramco for a project that had been delayed. Now, we'd purchased the equipment, paid for the equipment, delivered the equipment, but there was a little clause in the contract, and the contract says on commissioning. So revenue will be recognized on commissioning. So we delivered all this. So we get paid $64 million. So that was $128 million worth of equipment sitting in Saudi Aramco's yard. Wow. And some of it was actually on location, so on rigs. And because of that clause, they would not allow us, they wouldn't pay us number one, and then we couldn't recognize the revenue number two. So I basically went to Aramco and I says to them, look, it doesn't matter how you play this. This is really, really unfair. I cannot fund Saudi Aramco's business. You're asking me to fund your business. How? And forget about contract, forget about terms and conditions. If you can tell me how you think that's fair and how I can continue to go to business and run business, then I'm all ears. I'll accept that. But if you agree with me at any of these points, why this is so unfair to treat a service company like this, then, we have to change the terms and conditions. And then I got, well, you make millions off us in drilling and you make millions off us in that. And I went, whoa, agree. But this is my product line. This is, before one Baker Hughes, we were all separate products. We're all siloed products. I won't have a job. We will need to pull out. We will need to shut down our artificial lift business if we don't recognize as revenue. And I showed them the numbers. And in the meeting, one of the guys turned around and said to me, one of the senior Aramco guys says to me, you know what, James, you're absolutely right. This is unfair. Do you know what we'll do? If you go and put a letter together for me, highlighting everything you've discussed at this meeting, I will make sure we get the terms and conditions changed, and I will give you a letter. So all we needed was the letter. We didn't actually need the terms changed. We just needed a letter from Aramco stating that clause XYZ, terms and conditions were now changing to revenue would be paid and revenue can be now recognised. Because I also told them that because they're sitting in their yard, I'm going to have to charge them insurance. So I would go have to get an insurance policy because it still belongs to me, but it's in their yard, and that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. So I basically created this really strong case for them recognise the revenue. So that's how I did it.
There you go.
Well, it sounds like you're just willing to have have that conversation with them when nobody else thought it was even worthwhile.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got this belief of, if you ask the right questions, you generally kind of get the result you're looking for. It's about asking the right questions, and generally that starts to open up. For example, somebody says to you no. You need to find out why they're saying no. Most people don't just say no for the sake of, telling you to go. So for me, it's always about thinking, what can I say or do that's going to make them kind of almost emotionally attached to what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
Well, and you can see that in the example of, this isn't fair and this is why, and I can't run a business this way. Yes, we may make money in another part of the business, but that's not my part of the business. So you put that just in your story, you put that individual into that position of ownership of the business, just like you were, and said, I can't run a business this way. Could you run a business this way? And it's very hard. I mean, if somebody's got any type of sense of morality or ethics, it's a very difficult position for them to say, hey, I'm sorry, this is what it says, and if you get hurt because of it, then so be it.
Yeah, that was exactly how I played it. I just thought, this is really unfair.
Yeah. So you also mentioned you being in your experience in Dubai. So Dave was filling me in 2009, you took an HR role in Dubai. And within 6 months, you took the region from number 7 in people development to number 1.
Yeah.
How did you tell us that story? How do you do that? So
remember, this is post TwoLogical now. So mindset shift, big mindset shift also in my own beliefs. So pre this, the first story you've got was all pre TwoLogical. Then I did a week's training with TwoLogical and met an amazing guy, John. We all know John. John's superb guy. And so I kind of had a massive mindset shift around planning, goal setting. Now, I've always set goals, but I've never written them down. I've never really understood the power of the goal and the plan until TwoLogical came along, and then I really understood how they all intertwine. So anyway, I got the opportunity. So I was really successful in Dubai, and not just Dubai, in Saudi and Kuwait, and we really grew really strong, very profitable businesses. So when I got approached, by the way, this was also from Khalid Noor, the Vice President of Baker Hughes for the Middle East and Asia. He went to my boss. And my boss at this time was a guy called Alistair Sheikh. Mm-hmm. Absolutely incredible guy. He's again one of those key. Now we always find those little pivots in our life. Yeah, he was one of those pivots. So a lot of them seem to happen in a 3 or 4 year period that really excelled me to where I am today. And one of them was Alistair. He gave me the opportunity to move into senior management. He backed me up, but he also made me understand. He used to have a thing about, you don't ever go to him with a problem. Don't ever go to him with a problem, because if you do, you better have 2 or 3 solutions. So he made me almost take much more accountability and ownership for my own decisions. Now, he was happy for me to go to him with them, but as long as I had a few solutions to show that I was really thinking about the accountability. Anyway, so he came to me one day and we were having a lunch. We were having a kind of a big senior management kind of evening out, and we're in Saudi, and we're having a lovely Indian meal, believe it or not. We're having an Indian meal in this amazing restaurant they have in Saudi. And Alistair came up to me in the middle of the meal, and he says, James, I just want to let you know that, no, do you know what? I'm going to lie to you there. That wasn't how it happened. We were at the meal. Khalid Noor was at the meal. Mm-hmm. And he came up and he put his hand on my shoulder at the meal. And he leaned over and he says, I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Dubai. You're going to love your new position. Huh. And I looked at him and I thought, what? And I never said anything, because I thought, is he got the wrong person? I'm thinking, I don't know what he's talking about. So I went up to Alistair and I said, Alistair, Khalid just come up and says to me, XYZ. And he says, yeah. He says, I never got a chance to tell you. He phoned me today and he told me that you're moving to Dubai. And I said, what?
That's a hell of a way to find out.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and I said, no. I says, I haven't finished what I started. I want to do this and this and this, and I need another 18 months to 24 months in this job. First of all, I wanted to get somebody ready for my own role. And I had a guy that I was mentoring, and I felt like they needed more. I didn't want to bring somebody else in. I wanted to offer this guy. I want this guy to take over. And I'd been mentoring for, anyway, long story short, I said, no, I'm not going. And the next day, I get pulled into the office, into Alistair's office. He was the vice president for Saudi, Bahrain, and Kuwait. So I get pulled into Alistair's office. He says, look, James, Khaled wants an answer. I says, I've gave you my answer. I don't want to go. I need to finish what I've started. A couple of hours later, phone goes. Came down to the office. I went down to the office, and he says, look, James, Khaled's adamant that you're moving to this career development position. He really thinks, he says, his opinion is you're a rough diamond. He wants to smooth the rough edges off. Because I'm very, what you see is what you get. I talk like that, I act like that. I am that kind of guy. And I kind of thought, you know what, why not just try it? Because it was really right out of my comfort zone. I mean, I went from being a technical guy to doing management, but still almost, kind of man management. I felt like this was really right out of my comfort zone. I'm thinking, who in the right mind would put me in HR? Because I always thought of HR as quite a negative connotation of the business, kind of hiring and firing. But anyway, long story short, they sent me the job brief. They gave me a fantastic salary to go over to Dubai, etc., etc. So I moved over, and I didn't really understand what I was going to do. So I moved over to Dubai, and then we had a global meeting with all the other career development people, and it was a new thing that they'd rolled out when I was in the business and operations, and they kind of rolled it out across the globe. And it was basically, we look at the people we have, so all our engineers, our field engineers, and we were realigning them because the Macondo thing had happened. So we're realigning everybody based on experience and knowledge, and making sure that everybody was properly graded, and that the ones that didn't have the training were retrained, particularly around, technical, around soft skills. If you were in a management role and you hadn't done certain soft skills, presentation skills, sales skills, etc., etc. So I kind of thought, you know what? I think I could do a really good job here, because I knew what it was like to be the guy, the technical guy. I knew what it was like to be the operations guy. I knew what it was like to be the manager of all these other roles and responsibilities. And I thought I could probably do a really good job. So what I decided to do, I started getting people in. So people from wireline, people from drilling, and I kind of brought them into my group. And what I decided to do, I said, look, this won't work if we pass this off to operations. We need to own this. So basically what we did is I created an organisation within my team where we went to the different countries. We sat down, we trained the local HR, we trained the local operations people, and we held them accountable. So what I actually did, I got HR to put in their performance agreement. So part of their I think it was 15% of their performance bonus was associated directly with them implementing this process within their team, and then them implementing that with their junior management team. So the only way I seen this working was if we went to country, took all that onus off operations, because you know what, when you're in operations, all that matters revenue, a good job and then a well-paid job. So we kind of took that onus off the operations, and we owned it. And then we got those management teams to then own it. And then obviously they got their management team to then own it. So everybody had this tied into their performance reviews. We went from, so out of the 9 regions, we were the 7th worst region. 6 months, we were number 1, and we stayed number 1 for the next 18 months. We blew all records and by the way, I had then to teach all the other regions exactly what I was doing.
And it all started with ownership,
Yeah, absolutely. I am a massive believer in and how can I make it easier? How can I make any process, and I still do this today. I mean, I coach other businesses and other coaches, believe it or not, and I have a way of describing things to break it down so that it's in simple, easy to follow steps that you have to own. Don't pass the buck. Take responsibility. Look at the process. How can you make it simple? How can you make it easy? Put a system in place, and it should take care of itself.
Yeah. So James, let me ask you this, because I mean that inherently, I mean, to you and I and Sean, and I mean it just makes sense, really, you know, that, and yet we see so many people who they spend the better part of their lives making excuses. They spend the better part of their life pointing fingers and placing blame. They so quickly fall into that victim role, and they avoid taking ownership at all costs. I mean, why do you think people do that?
I think the simple answer to that is people don't know what people don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I think I don't want to dismiss it, but it is people. I'm going to contradict myself, because even when you show someone, right? I mean, the way that I do everything is, so if you think about building a house, yeah, the foundation is the belief, yeah. You've got to have that right first. You've got to get that foundation, or the house will start to crack, it will start to slant, and it will eventually fall. So it's all about that belief. Now, you can only take the horse to the water. There's no way you can make them drink it until they decide that it's the right thing and that what you're saying makes more sense to them. It's a really difficult one, because we all know inherently, you know, any strength that we have was a weakness at one point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we learned to walk, we learned to talk, play a guitar, you know, play football. We weren't born to do these things. And I think people don't understand, but I'm going to say something. I think people have it too easy.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want something, and here's you'll know exactly who this is when I say it. It's in the want to that you will find the how to.
I think I've heard that before.
Yeah, maybe.
That was John. And that stuck with me forever. And that's something that I use every day in my life. It's in the want to that you find the how to. So how much do you want to be successful? How much do you want to give up cigarettes? How much do you want to have a successful business? Because guess what? Success is difficult, or it can be very difficult. But if you want it enough, you will do what it takes to achieve the results that you know you need.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned something else there too. You know, it's in the want to that you find the how to, but you also kind of mentioned that you think, you know, maybe people have it too easy. So I wanted to circle back to, you know, you mentioned that you know, didn't grow up with a whole lot of money, and you grew up kind of with the notion that, you know, going to university was for other people. It wasn't for you. So to that point, what did you do after graduating high school?
So when you're going to love this story. So when we graduated high school, so my father asked me to stay on school, because I was at 16. I was still young, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So my dad basically paid me to go back to school for an extra year. So he said to me, I will give you the same money that your mates are making in, you know, a factory. I will pay you the same money. I think it was something like $40 a week or whatever it was. I will pay you to go back to school. Because I really didn't know, because I was supposed to go work with my dad. The whole plan was I was going to leave school, I would go work with my dad, he would teach me what to do, I would get my own van, I would be a floor layer for the rest of my life. And I thought, ain't going to happen. That ain't going to happen. If you see my dad's hands and knees, you'll realize why that was not going to happen.
Business, yeah.
So I did try it. I went out in the summer and I tried it, and I didn't enjoy it. My dad asked me to go back to school, and he would fund me to go back to school. So I did, and I got the exams I needed. Or I actually didn't know what I was going to do, but I got decent exam results. And I remember thinking, what do I want to do with my life? And I really didn't know. And my dad came in, it was on a Thursday afternoon, and I remember coming in from work, And he said to me, James, no son of mine is going to lie about this house all day. If you want to live in this house, now I'm being really kind with the language I'm using. No son of mine will lay around this house. If you want to live here, you go find a job. And I don't know if you remember the big yellow pages, and it was like 400,000 pages thick.
Yeah.
So he sat this big yellow thing down in front of me, and he says, find a job. And I'm thinking, oh no. So anyway, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I always had a kind of interest in electrical. I don't know why I had this interest. And I remember, I don't know if you remember the big fat TVs we used to get with the big bulbs in the back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the big old-fashioned TV. So obviously we had one of those. So in the late 70s and 80s, we had those TVs. And it always used to break down. And this little guy would always come to the door in his little brown coverall. It was like a long brown jacket and a little brown leather briefcase, tool case. And he would come in, he would open up his tool case, and he would take the TV down. He would play about it for 20 minutes, put it back together and say, Mrs. Fleming, that was $80. And the minute he left, my mum would say, that XXX just cost me a fortune. Literally words. And I remember, I thought, oh, I wonder if they must make lots of money. Yeah, so I get the yellow pages out, I look for TV repair, and I started phoning them up. Now, here's the kicker. Remember the old phones, the dial phone? You turn the dial, and if you got the number wrong, you had to start again. After 3 hours, my finger was bleeding. It was red rot, and I just kept getting no's and no interest, don't have any apprentices, don't have any jobs. And I was on the phone for a good 3.5, 4 hours, phoning so I went for TV repair, to electrical, to electronic. I tried everything, nothing. And I was just about to quit, and I got the phone rang. So I picked up and said, hi, James. This is James Fleming. Hi, James. This is Brian. You called the company. We're a company. We'd like to invite you down. We were really impressed that you had the tenacity to lift up the phone and call us. We'd like to invite you down for a interview. I went, yes, you're a dancer. So the next day, my dad said, Dad, I've got an interview. So this was on the Friday. So on the Friday morning, my dad took me down to this industrial area, and it was a really nice building, nice glass front to it. And I went in, and they took me into a little interview room, and they made me do an eyesight test, a color blindness test. So I did this color blindness test, and then they asked me to do an aptitude test. And I think I got something like 98% on the aptitude test. So they offered me the job there and then. They said, we'd like to offer you an apprenticeship. I'm thinking, yes, amazing. So anyway, he gets home, tells my family, yeah, I've got a job. Now remember, I'm still thinking I'm fixing TVs. Right? So we need to keep this part in mind. So on the Monday morning, I was told to go down and come round the back of the office. So we drive down. My dad went down in his van, was dropped me off. It was 7:30 in the morning. And I seen all these men standing in the hard hats and big boiler suits and, rigger boots. And I'm thinking, what the hell kind of TVs are they fixing? And I still didn't know. So I get taken into the back of the workshop. They took me upstairs to this office. It was like a storeroom. And they gave me this big blue metal toolbox, and it had hammers and chisels. And I'm thinking, what? I don't understand. Where's my wee brown coverall? Where's my brown briefcase? I was so confused. And then it hit me. I'm not fixing TVs. I'm not fixing TVs. And that was the start of it. So I got my time served. I think they call it in the US master electrician.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Here they call it approved. So you get electrician, then you get the next stage. So anyway, I got my approved electrician card, and I was running a big job. This was 4 years later, and I was running this massive job in a local university. And I was sitting I used to have my little office, and everybody would come in the morning. You would tell them the jobs they're going to do and which areas they're working in and who's doing fire alarms and who's doing this. And so you were so you call it the charge hand or the foreman for the electrical side of things. So, and I remember sitting thinking to myself, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Something in my head was saying, you need to find a way out. I don't know what it was, and I don't know why. I just knew I didn't want to do it. And I went and enrolled in college. So I went back to college, and I did a thing called a higher national diploma. So it's one step away from a degree. Mm-hmm. And that was in robotics and electronic engineering. And that then led to the job with Intel. So that was the whole path. So it was those little again pivot points, and me sitting there that one day looking at all these men coming in and I'm nearly 50 now, and looking at all these men coming in their 40s, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be their age still doing this. Yeah. Yeah. And that was it. And that started me on I knew that if I wanted to achieve something, then I would have to take control, that I would have to own it. So that forced me to go back into further education. And then once I started the learning process, I was hooked. That was when I started realizing the importance of books and educating myself, and that kind of obviously led to Intel, and Intel led to joining Baker Hughes. And I mean, that was just another whole story. The whole Baker Hughes thing was totally almost accidental as well.
And what strikes me too, and you've said it right from the beginning, James, is it really does all start with that belief, because you think about how so many people, they may feel trapped in a job, and they may sit back and, like you did, say, I'm going to be sitting in the same role doing the same thing, 20 years from now. But if they don't believe that they can make their life into something else, that they can learn new skills and learn new abilities, they'll stay trapped in that spot.
Totally, David. I mean, I see it so often. For me, I mean, it's even the same. So let's talk leadership. So it's even the same. I have seen people who are in those types of positions. They have this consistent excuse of blaming everyone in the business, all of their staff, everyone, that why it's everybody else's fault, and you just can't get the right people. And I'm sitting saying, no, mold them. They're always going to get people that you just can't change. Yeah, people have just, I think the best analogy is when you've got a bowl of fruit and you put a rotten apple in, it spreads. You're always going to have those people, but the majority of people just want structure. They want somebody to lead them. They want a system. The people want you to show. And again, that's a belief. If a manager or a leader within it, I'll use the term loosely leader in this instance, but if you have someone in a business who's supposed to be leading the business or leading people, they also have to have that same belief that it's down to them to change the culture. It's down to them to make the people perform a little bit better by looking at people like yourself or myself and bringing us in to show them how easy it is to change that belief. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
No, you absolutely did. And, and it's really belief, especially when you're talking from that leadership perspective, it's belief on two levels, because if the leader doesn't think that way, if they don't believe that about themselves, that, that they're in control, that, they're responsible, if they don't believe that, they themselves have that unlimited ability to learn, and to get better. If somebody doesn't see that in themselves, they won't see it in other people either.
Absolutely, David. It doesn't matter whether you're an employee, you're a leader of a company, you're the owner of a company. The belief is the key to everything that happens. The minute you decide that you're now having to take control and that you've got to own this and that you can make things better, you can change, you can learn. The minute you decide, and by the way, as a choice, the minute you make that choice, I believe everything changes.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Well, and you said something earlier, and I want to circle back to it, because I think it's such an important. There's those turning point awarenesses that people have that, once they, it's like unlocking a door. And once that door opens, then, a whole new reality opens up to them. But, the first one you talked about, and that's taking that level of ownership, letting go of the excuses, saying that, it's my responsibility. If things aren't going well, I have to change something, so that opens that first door. And until somebody walks through that door, they will largely live in that victim space. And so everything's outside of their control and there's nothing they can do. Challenges, they're never happy there because everything is thrust upon them. So you talked about that first door, and the second door is that belief around our ability to learn. And, you said something I want to circle back to, that, every strength that we have today, every single thing that we're good at today, at one point in time in our life was a weakness, from the simple day-to-day things that we don't even give a second thought to anymore, like getting out of a chair and walking. When we were 9 months old, that was seemingly an impossible, thing for us to be able to do. But, through practice and falling down, giving ourselves permission to make a mistake, learning from it, adjusting, we learned to walk, and that weakness became a strength. Same thing with talking, at one point in time we could, string to, but we couldn't put together words. But through that same process of practicing and learning from our mistakes, now we speak. We don't really think about it. Driving a car, writing, using a computer. I mean, every single thing that we're good at today, at one point in time was a weakness of ours. And we were able to turn a weakness into a strength. And we can do that for anything in life, and you talked about, the football players, or soccer players for those in the States. And, those individuals out there who are phenomenal soccer players, they weren't born a phenomenal soccer player. That at one point in time was a weakness of theirs, but because they kept practicing it, it turned into a strength. And I think that's that second door for people is recognizing that, well, if I could turn all of these other weaknesses in my past into the strengths I have today, what weaknesses do I have today that I can turn into my strengths for tomorrow?
Absolutely. And I think something changes in us when we start to grow out of those youths and adolescence, whether it's experiences, whether it's knockdowns, something changes, because we all of us have went through that. We all know that that's true. It's true that we will grow, become better, become stronger, and turn it into a strength. But trying sometimes to get to tell someone that it just is as simple as making the choice first of all, and then implementing the habits or the routines to make that to be true, it just sometimes really almost, and I think it's because of where I am in the space that I live in now, that I sometimes feel like hitting people's heads against the wall and going, no.
Yeah, no. And to that point, what do you think it is? I think people do kind of maybe don't realize or don't embrace the idea that this is a choice. What do you think it is that holds them back? Or in your experience, what's kind of been the flip of the switch or the aha moment that has gotten people from one side to the other?
Yeah. So the first question is, people fear losing, right? So for example, so the risk of, so we move from our adolescence, we go through experiences, life, girlfriends, being dumped, the whole 9 yards of life. And then we move into our kind of mid to late 20s, and we get in a relationship, or we start to put debt in our lives, and we have the car we can't afford, and the house we can't afford, and the kids we can't afford. And what some people do is they almost get into that fear zone, that comfort. I mean, the easiest way to describe it is almost a fear stroke comfort zone, where, well, I can't do that because I don't want this to happen. So we almost allow fear. I've got an analogy that I use with some people. So if you look at life as driving a car, So the road of life is this windy, as we know it to be true. It isn't straight. The road to success isn't straight. Life is full of ups and downs, peaks and troughs. It's this windy road, right? And you're the car. So life is you're sitting in the car. Now, when we're young kids, now we're driving that car. We're in full control. When we get into our kind of teens, we're still driving the car. But if you imagine fear is the passenger. Now, it's a backseat passenger. We're in our teens, mid to late teens. Normally, fear's a backseat passenger. So if you imagine when you're driving your car, when somebody's in the back, every now and again, we look in the mirror, we have a conversation. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So that's like fear. And then we get into our late teens, early 20s. We start getting into that kind of late 20s. And fear moves from backseat to passenger seat. Now, imagine you're talking to your passenger. Now, when somebody's sitting in the passenger seat, you tend to listen a lot and you tend to take advice a lot. So you have a much more impact type of conversation. Yeah? You talk to them more often. You take advice from them. They kind of try to guide you where you need to go. Now, we get in our 30s and our 40s and we have that house and that mortgage and those kids. And all of a sudden, it isn't you that's driving the car of life anymore. Fear is the one telling you it. Fear is now your sat nav of life. That, I believe, is I suppose a way to describe what I think happens. Now, it's not until a lot of people hit rock bottom, and I think that's why we hear so many of those stories about a hot rock bottom, a bounce back, and I've created this amazing business. We hear so many of those kind of fairy tale sob stories, because sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they realize, you know what? I've only got one way to go, is up. This isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. My view of that is it doesn't have to be like that. You don't need to hit rock bottom. You don't need to go down there. You just need to decide what it is you want. How much do you want it? And then go get it. But that's a really difficult one, because you've just went through years and years and years of this complete opposite story.
Yeah. Well, and, to that point, deciding what you want and going to get it. And I think you bring up great points in terms of the older you get, the more fear, the more risk there is a lot of times, when you have a family and things like that. And so fear becomes, put in that driver's seat. So in the context of your career journey, you kind of took seemingly from the outside, a relatively big risk, recently, in that you took the entrepreneurial leap to start your own consulting practice at a time in your life and career where most people would be driven by fear. Can you tell us, why was that something you wanted to do, and what you've kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, I did it because I knew I could. I kind of looked at my career and what I've done for other people and all those barriers and challenges that I'd overcame, and I thought, it can't be any harder than what I've just came through. And it was, by the way, so I got it wrong. It was a lot harder initially. But imagine having to have that conversation with your wife, with your daughter. Now, my wife is, part of my business, so she's always been fully on board. But my wife came from a really privileged background. We've always had money since, particularly when we joined oil and gas. For the last 22 years, we went 4 or 5-star holidays a year. We drove nice cars. We had nice houses. Going from all that known to this massive unknown. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Having to say to my daughter, for the next few years, honey, we probably won't be able to do the things that you're used to doing. All the things that daddy's always handed to you and given you. Things will change. But, and luckily my daughter's went through most of her life hearing her dad talk about this positive mindset. You can be what you want to be. So she kind of got it. My wife also was on board because she knew if anybody could do it, then I could. So that helped. That definitely helped, that the key members of my family were on board. Now, picture this. You're leaving a £200,000 a year job, and you're just going to tell your dad you're starting up a business that you've never done before. You can imagine what my dad said and what his face was like. He's like, what? He did not understand whatsoever. And I absolutely understand why. He couldn't understand. And he was so horrified at the thought of me doing this. But I knew with every ounce of me that I was willing to do whatever it took to make it work. If it meant losing everything, so be it. And by the way, there was a point. Now, when I moved back to the UK, I went into Mercedes garage and I bought the fanciest, beautifulest car I could, because I could. I almost had to sell that car in the first year. I almost had to sell it. Things were not going to plan at all. And it wasn't nice, because I've, when you're used to a certain way of life, standard of life, but what kept me going, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what kept me going was I did not for 1 second doubt the path that I was on. I knew that even right for the outset, I was impacting people's lives. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was passing down my knowledge, and I was given, free of charge a lot of the time, just for experience. I was taking up voluntary roles. I was just submersed. And my wife used to say to me a lot, like, whoa, you need to take a breath. And I'm like, no, this is going to happen. and every time that I thought I was done, something worked out. Somebody would come and say, can you run the 4-day workshop? There's $10,000. I'm like, yeah. I would always pretend I'd need to check my diary, of course. Let me have a look first. Yay! But it always worked because I knew that all the work that you put in at the start, you start to see those. So go back to every strength is once a weakness. If you're putting in the time and effort to learn to walk or talk, eventually you're going to learn to walk and talk. As long as you're learning for your mistakes. Yep. As long as you're constantly learning, which I was. I said this to Dave last time I was having a chat. I have a mantra, and I have a thing on every wall in my house that's a picture or family mottos. And one of those mottos is, every day I win or I learn. That's it. And that's what's helped me. So that's what, first of all, the undying belief that I knew that I was following my own dream, because I thought, you know what, if I give it 5 years, at least I've tried. At least I can say I've tried. I didn't want to be that person lying in my, taking my last breath and regretting decisions that I'd made in my life, regretting not trying. I thought, I'm never going to be that guy.
Yeah. Wow. And I remember years ago, one of the things that, my mentor had said to me, and it was like an offhanded comment. We were driving someplace, and I had met him in the mall of a parking lot where I parked my car and got into his. And he looked at me, he goes, I've been thinking about something lately. He said, what I've been thinking about is the fact that everything in life is cumulative. And he goes, if somebody does something one time, it doesn't really make much of a difference, for most things. And it's not really going to make much of a difference in terms of the direction of their life. But if you do something, cumulatively, where you build a little bit of momentum each and every day, he said, pretty soon things start to matter a lot. And, and at the time, I don't know that I had really reflected a lot on that concept, but over the years, I certainly have. And you really realize, to your point, James, that, if you tell your spouse you love them once, okay, well, that's a nice thing to do. But if you tell your spouse that you love them every single day, and that they mean the world to you, and, you just keep consistently doing that over the course of all the days, all of a sudden you've built a lot of positive momentum in the relationship. If you hug your kids every day, tell them that you believe in them, do it once. All right, it's good, but it doesn't really make a huge difference. But if you do it every day, it makes a huge difference. And that, to your point, James, that's exactly what you did. Each day you worked on building that positive momentum, that, accumulative momentum, and it led you to success. So, James, talk to us a little bit about, obviously you in running your own business and in building a life for yourself and, and your family. There's a lot of areas where we want to build cumulative momentum. So what are some of the key areas that you really focus on in order to maintain your success?
So there's probably a few things that are absolutely key to creating the right kind of routines and habits to be able to maintain success. And it's like you said previously about the momentum. Momentum isn't by chance or luck, yeah? Momentum is done through consistency and persistence, and the only way to do that is to have something to focus on, have a set of routines and habits. And for me, goal setting is massive. Yep, absolutely massive. Now, I read a book that I absolutely love, James Clear, Atomic Habits. Amazing book. Now, he's a little bit of conflict in terms of goals, but what I think he means by, or what I'm going to describe is, goals for me, having that vision of where I want to be in 5 or 10 years' time, and then being able to break that in to 12 months. Now, I only ever work in 12-month increments. I don't work in 5 years because that's my vision. Mm-hmm. So I only ever work in 12-month increments. So all my goals are always based around the big goal is the next 12 months. And that big goal is split into normally 5. I have a thing called the power of 5. Everything I do, it works in this number 5. Don't ask me why. It's in my brain. It's something that I just do. So it's a thing I call the power of 5. So I have 5 big goals for the next year. And then I break those goals into 90-day plans, into 30-day plans, into a weekly plan. And then not only that, I actually, and you'll get this one, I have a list of 5 high payoff activities that I do every single day. And that to make sure that I'm moving towards my goals every single day. Now, the beauty of that is it also lets me see really quickly what isn't working versus what is working. And I have that in my life, and I do that almost religiously. That's something that I do, and that helps keep me moving in the right direction. And then part of that is also, so I've got business and I've also got personal. Now, I talk about high performance. Now, I believe anybody who is working at a certain level, particularly building a business, you need to be performing at a high level. To do that, you need to have something to focus on, and that's where the goals come in. Now, on top of that, I also have my personal stuff, which is reading a book. Now, I probably go through 1 book a week, sometimes 2, but normally 1 book. So me and my wife, we're both do it together. We listen to a book. We do the audio books, Audible. So we listen to at least 1 book a week. And I always pick up something and I put that I've learned during that book, and I actually implement it into my business. I make it part of my system or process if it really sounds like something that will help. So that's been invaluable, really learning. I think it's Warren Buffett, I think, says the more you learn, the more you earn. Mm-hmm. So true. So true. But only if you put that knowledge into action. Only if you put it into action. I mean, you can be so much knowledge and it means nothing unless you do something with it.
Right. So
the goals help me do something with it. The goals help me keep moving forward, even when I've had a bad day. Now, I don't ever have bad weeks. I've a bad day or a couple of bad days because I'm learning all the time, so I can adjust. And then the next thing is the personal stuff, so the books and the keep healthy. So for me, we do a lot of walking and a lot of running and a lot of cycling. When I say a lot, normally we're 45 minutes in the morning and we're normally an hour to an hour and a half in the evening. That's cycling or running or walking. So we mix it up, and that's 5 or 6 days a week. Now, we don't drink alcohol during the week, normally at all. Now, I do like a drink. I am Scottish, so let me just put that out there.
Well, you got to maintain your status for Theresa May, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah. I ain't having anybody hear this podcast and think I don't like a drink. No, I do, but it's all moderation. I'll probably have maybe a bottle of wine on a Friday. Probably not a Friday because I go running a Saturday, but on a Saturday is our kind of, we have a movie night or we do something and I have a bottle of wine, maybe a little bit of whiskey, depending how I feel. So, but during the week it's a no-no because I need to be on top performance all the time. I have to wake up. I actually wake up, now this sounds crazy to some people. I wake up excited about the day ahead. I wake up excited about what's going to happen. And that's due to eating healthy, drinking lots of water. I just try to really live the best life I can because I know if I want to perform at my best, I need to be on that level.
Yeah, no, and I love this. I love this concept of the power of five, and I'd be curious if you're willing to share some or all of, what does that look like for you? What are the goals that you're focusing on? Are they in specific categories? And maybe what are those high payoff activities that you're focusing on every day?
Yeah, so I have my list of my high five, and all of them. Now, for example, so you may find that on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm only maybe focusing on one or two of the goals because I prioritize them. So there'll be some goals that maybe I think, okay, I'm not going to really focus on that this week, but next week I'm going to. So I always prioritize based on, and I'm always working on things as well 12 months down the line. So there's things that I will work on now, but I won't see any outcome or until maybe 8, 9, 10, 12 months down the line. So I'm always working on something. So for example, I have one of my 30-day plans is to sign up 30 new construction clients. Now I have a process and a system in place that ensures that I am always meeting that target or at least on target. So for example, on Monday, LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, one LinkedIn post and then the subject, and then LinkedIn post the second subject. So I normally post on LinkedIn. 95% of my business is through LinkedIn. So I'm always on LinkedIn putting posts to my specific market, or I'm putting in information or something somebody can learn. I don't really do a lot of Facebook, but I do know that some of my target market are on there, so I spend a little bit of time there, not personally, but it's one of my high payoffs, so that it must be done, so that I'm always moving forward. Another one would be something like, so for today, this morning, I had a new business coaching client. So today I was out meeting them, so I was signing them up onto my new online coaching program. So because one of my goals for the 12 months is to sign up 5 new business coaching clients per month. Now I can't actually take care of all those clients, so I have other people who actually take care of them, but I always am the one out there doing the business side of it. So these are all my 5. So for example, I have 5 main goals. On my 90-day plan, I have 5 90-day goals. On my 30-day plan, I have 5 30-day plan goals. On my weekly plan, I have 5 weekly goals. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I have 5 small goals, which I call high payoff activities. And it's the power of 5. I look at it like this. And this is probably the easiest way to describe it. Now, imagine right in front of you, you have this massive oak tree. And it's 150 feet high, and the trunk of the tree is 7 meters in circumference. Yeah, this massive oak tree in front of you. Now, I also want you to imagine I'm going to give you a nice sharp axe, brand new, nice big sharp heavy axe. Yeah, but I'm going to give you some rules. So the first set of rules is you're not allowed to hit the tree. You've got to hit it 5 times a day, only 5 times. But you're not allowed to hit the tree in the same place more than once. How long do you think it's going to take you to chop down that tree?
Really long time.
Okay, same tree, same axe, different rules. So 5 times a day, but you've got to hit it in the same place over and over and over again. Now, how quick do you think you're going to chop down the tree now?
Much, much faster.
Okay, so that's how my mind works on the power of 5. As long as I'm consistently taking a little bit out of that tree at the same place over and over again, eventually the branch is going to fall, the tree is going to fall. And I have this thing in my mind about the power of 5, that I know that if I'm constantly taking the right actions every day, eventually that tree is going to start to move.
Yeah. No, I think I love that metaphor.
Yeah. He's like the king of the metaphors.
Yeah,
Seriously. You're driving the car,
yeah, exactly.
hitting the tree with the axe in the same spot.
Yeah, man. He's got him on lock.
But do you know why though? Because a lot of people, so people look at me, I mean, go back to the soccer player, right? When you look at these exceptionally talented people, we tell ourselves a narrative, don't we? We tell ourselves a story. How they're better than us, they're stronger than us, they went to better college. We have a narrative in our mind about why we'll never be that person. And I don't mean everybody's going to be this world-class, soccer player or football player or whatever it is. But we have a narrative that we play in our mind, the story that we repeat to ourselves. Now, I find metaphors is an easy way to break that down. I find it that people kind of get it quicker and easier if I go, no, wait a minute. Ronaldo did this and Messi was this, and I can almost break it down by using metaphors. So that's why I use them. I find it much easier to get to my end result by telling metaphors.
Yeah. Well, and to use one of your metaphors to tie that down, it's to your point. It's like we look at the people who are sitting at that other table, whether it's a great athlete, whether it's somebody who's successful in business, and we try to come up with, why they're different than us. And then you got to the point where you're at that table and you realized they're exactly like me. And I think that's, the only difference is that, they have experiences. They've practiced things in certain specific areas of life that maybe are a little different than the ones that you've practiced up to that point.
Yeah. And a lot of them have similar mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to say, a lot of people that are at that kind of high performance kind of level, they do think slightly different from them than most people.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great point. It's amazing what you can accomplish just consistently doing a little bit every day. It's and to Dave's point earlier about everything being cumulative, you really start to get that compound interest when you're just putting in the work a little bit at a time every single day. So, James, I want to be respectful of your time, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask if there was one thing that somebody listening to this right now, you would want them to walk away remembering, what would that be?
I think we've talked about probably most of the things. Every strength is once a weakness is absolutely imperative. It's in the want to that you find the how to. That's another key thing for me. And you can have success or you can have excuses. You can't have both. You have to stop. If someone's done it before, I'll guarantee you whatever it is you want to do, there's someone has done it before you have. They're probably for the same type of area, the same type of background. They've done it. So if they've done it, it doesn't just mean it's both plausible, but it means it's possible. And you don't always have to go and reinvent the wheel. Go find out what they did. I'm a big believer in modeling. I'm into my NLP and I believe in modeling. Go find out what they do. How do they talk? How do they act? What kind of things do they do? And do some of that. That's another key thing. So I could literally go on all day with the things, but I'm going to stick with it. It's in the want to that you will find the how to. If you want something bad enough, if you want to make yourself successful in anything, whether it's in employment or as a leader, have that belief that it's possible, because that belief will direct your thoughts. And those thoughts will create the actions that you take. I have people say so often to me, but it's okay for you. You're different. No, I'm not. I ain't different. I'm the wee guy for Glasgow who was brought up in this type of life, and I ain't different. I just want it. I'm willing to put everything on the line to make it happen. And if it all goes away tomorrow, I'll pick back up, I'll put a smile on my face, I'll get up, and I'll keep moving forward.
There you go.
I think that's a great place to wrap.
I think that's a wonderful one. James, as always, I so enjoy our conversations and getting an opportunity to hang out with you. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. And you know where my heart lies with TwoLogical anyway. I think I want to finish up with saying, honestly, guys, TwoLogical has been a massive part of my journey. And if you think about it, back in 2008, 2009 was when I first came across TwoLogical. We are so far away, down that line, and there's still a big part of everything I do, how I think, how I act, and I'm still learning for you guys as well every single day. So for that, the pleasure is all mine.
Very kind words. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
And say hello to John for me.
We certainly will.
We'll do so.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is brought to you by TwoLogical's new virtual seminar, Adapt: How to Thrive in a World of Turbulence. Join David Naylor in this exclusive live event with leadership insights on how to effectively transition and manage your team remotely, create a new team purpose and vision for 2021, turn fear and uncertainty into consistent motivation and action, and a whole bunch more. Go to TwoLogical.com for more information on dates. And as a listener of this podcast, you get a 20% discount on tickets. Just use the code ADAPT2020 at checkout. The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is also brought to you by Mojo, the mental fitness app incubated at TwoLogical. With new insights and guidance every day, people that use Mojo report feeling less stressed and more motivated, boosted performance at work, and improved well-being at home. You even get access to episodes of this podcast up to 2 weeks early on Mojo. Mojo is available through invitation only, so join the waitlist at joinmojo.com to reserve your place in line.